They Live is an 80s movie that I've come to love, because it's an accurate metaphor for our ridiculous clown world that we're living in today. Let's do a rundown of the plot first, because many people, especially those younger than 40, have never heard of it. For the older folks, you may recognize this line.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
First, I'll tell you all about the movie, and then I'll tell you why this movie is so relevant in 2026. It's spooky just how many times They Live accurately describes society today. The plot. They Live follows the journey of a man named Nada. Yes, that's his name. You can check the credits. Did you somehow miss it? Nope. That's because you never hear his name spoken aloud in the movie. Not even once. Nada, of course, means nothing in Spanish, so director John Carpenter was giving us a character who is seen as a nobody in society. Bottom of the barrel, no money, no home, nothing. Well, Nada makes his way to LA because back in Denver, all the construction work dried up, and even the banks were failing. Everything Nada owns, he carries on his back. He gets a temporary gig on a construction site, meets Frank, and Frank shows him to a makeshift homeless settlement where they can get food and shelter. While there, Nada notices strange broadcasts keep coming up on the TV, disrupting the regular programming. A bearded man talks about a mysterious group that is ruling everyone from the shadows and keeping the world's population distracted and subdued. Nada realizes that these interruptive broadcasts have something to do with a church across the road. He investigates the church basement and finds out that sunglasses are being manufactured down there. He later takes a pair and walks around downtown LA with the sunglasses on. Little did he know, he was in for the shock of his life. The sunglasses show Nada the truth about all the billboards, magazines, and consumer products. Instead of pictures and ad slogans, Nada sees the following phrases: obey, consume, no thought, marry and reproduce, stay asleep, do not question authority, no imagination, no independent thought, no ideas, honor apathy, surrender, submit, doubt humanity, follow, cooperate, and watch TV. It's disturbing when Nada looks at some paper money and sees the words, "This is your God," written on it. He realizes that the human race is being inundated with subliminal messages. Even more shocking is when Nada realizes that a lot of the people walking around aren't people at all. Bug-eyed, lipless aliens walk around interacting with regular humans, pretending to be the same as them. The aliens work, they shop, they gossip, and worse, they have infiltrated the law enforcement, the news, and all the highest positions of government. It quickly becomes clear that the crazy bearded guy on the TV was right. They have taken over everything and enslaved mankind without us even realizing it. They live, we sleep. Well, Nada doesn't take too kindly to this. When it becomes apparent that he is able to see them for what they really are, alien cops are called, they attack him, and he kills 2 of them. He then goes on a shooting spree in a nearby bank, taking out as many of the aliens as he can. Pretty wild, but as he said,
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Nada observes the aliens talking to each other through their watches, a very unique notion in the 80s, well ahead of its time. They can also use their watches to teleport and escape danger. Once outside the bank, Nada also realizes that there are drones flying overhead, which monitor everyone and alert the authorities when someone becomes disruptive, or, like in Nada's case, when they need to hunt down a human who can see. So, after busting the drone with his shotgun, Nada takes a woman hostage in the garage of the bank and forces her to drive him to her home so he can escape the authorities. The bright blue-eyed Holly lives in an expensive hillside house, and the moment he lets his guard down, Holly smacks Nada on the noggin and pushes him through a glass door, and down the hill he rolls. We see Holly again later, and trust me, you'll come to hate her. Nada evades the cops again and makes his way back to the alley where he stashed a box of the special sunglasses. There, he encounters Frank from the worksite, who has by that point heard the news reports and believes that Nada is a murderer who shot up a bank. Nada tries to convince Frank to put the sunglasses on so that he'll see the truth and know Nada is innocent. Frank very stubbornly refuses, but Nada keeps insisting and they end up in a fistfight. A ridiculously long fistfight, several minutes long, and with some moves that would make Nacho Libre proud. Finally, after beating each other to death, Frank is forced to don the sunglasses and look around. He finally sees the truth and knows that Nada is not the bad guy after all. They recuperate for a while, then run into a man from the earlier church, the one who had served the homeless food and helped to send out the illegal broadcasts. He tells them about a secret resistance meeting with other people who can see, While there, he and Frank are given new contact lenses that replace the sunglasses, and guess who walks in? Holly. No time for a reconciliation, however, because just as they get to talking and Holly apologizes for defenestrating Nada, the authorities blow through a wall and invade the meeting. Nada and Frank barely make it out alive, while most do not. They use one of the aliens' watches, given to Frank by the Resistance moments earlier, and manage to open up a portal in the floor through which they escape. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. The portal takes them down into an underground tunnel system. There are signs posted in English and, well, alien. They come across a large, lavish banquet hall where a meeting is taking place. People are dressed to impress and listening to an alien talk about how much money they've all made that year. These people are the elite of the world. They are fully aware that they are working for aliens, they're working with them willingly, and they are rewarded with riches and power for their cooperation. They bump into a man from a homeless site, only now he's dressed in a tux, and he's living the high life. Apparently, he made a deal with the alien authorities, and now he's one of the elites. He mistakenly takes Nada and Frank for co-conspirators and shows them around the underground base. He shows how the aliens and their human collaborators can travel from world to world or between galaxies with their advanced tech. He also shows them the news production facility and the equipment that makes use of the master radio signal. This is the alien broadcast sent out to the entire world that keeps the humans blind to the aliens' true nature. Turns out the crucial satellite is on top of that very building. Frank and Nada fight their way up to the upper floors of the building, where they find Holly, again, and take her along with them. Nada rushes up the stairs to the roof, but before Frank can follow him, Holly pulls a gun out and shoots Frank in the head. She confronts Nada on the roof, but he's quick and takes her out. He then proceeds to shoot the alien device rigged to the satellite. Sadly, a police helicopter guns Nada down right after he blasts the bizarre tech. His sacrifice wasn't for nothing. Without the signal being broadcast, all of a sudden everyone can see the aliens in their true and hideous form. Bulging eyes, no lips, blue and red blotchy skin. It took a human who was willing to sacrifice everything to reveal the identity of mankind's parasitic alien masters. Then there's us. Did any of that feel familiar? Maybe a little unsettling? It should. We're in the middle of 2026. As a society, we've gone through several phases in recent years. Here are the ones that I've personally lived through. An age of societal innocence in the 90s, when it was the Wild Wild West in Hollywood and lots of crazy movies and shows were being made that would probably be punishable by cancellation today. Sure, there was corruption and evil, but American society was generally ignorant of most of it. The mainstream media was widely trusted and was the main source of information for most citizens and presented itself in a generally more neutral demeanor. The internet was barely a new idea to most people in the mid to late 90s. Amazon started as an online bookstore in 1995. That's the same year we got a more user-friendly Microsoft Windows 95. Then we had the 2000s, where things were still fairly wild in the entertainment industry, but were more and more shifting towards an attitude of being more politically correct. Mainstream news was still the official word, but was starting to act more political and partisan. Just as an example, you may remember Glenn Beck started on Fox back in 2009. The internet gained momentum as people became more accustomed to it and businesses started to rely heavily on it. In the 2010s especially, we saw a strong shift towards PC tyranny in entertainment, with DEI politics saturating, or at least making an appearance, in almost every movie and TV show. That may be an exaggeration, but not by much. Cancel culture became a reactional response to anyone who stepped out of line. The Me Too movement supercharged it in 2017. The mainstream news was, by this point, no longer neutral in any way, and now operated more like talk shows that used current events as topics for spouting personal opinions, at least those they were instructed to have, and gossip. And now we're in the 2020s, and all I can say is, yikes. Yikes, yikes, yikes. We kicked this decade off with a global pandemic, lockdowns, soft totalitarianism, and a brainwashing campaign by mainstream media, the likes of which my generation had never experienced before. You could say that 2020 to 2021 was so bad and the hypocritical moralizing so blatant that it finally pushed a lot of citizens to have an awakening. People started waking up to the fact that the TV can lie to us, not just a little, but to an enormous and ludicrous extent. They woke up to the fact that megacorporations and pharmaceutical empires are pushing narratives through the daily news. They woke up to the fact that the wealthiest people in the world push one set of rules on us while abiding by a completely different set of rules for them, and lie about it. They woke up to the fact that much of history has been rewritten and skewed to villainize heroes and push ideological narratives that align with the desires of corrupt government entities and their masters who only want to make regular people fight each other instead of realizing where the problems are really coming from. Now give it a little more time, and more people than ever learned about a certain infamous Jeffrey Epstein, which led everyone to finally see clearly how a connected group of the most wealthy and powerful elites in the world are running the show, doing whatever they want to whomever they wish, committing heinous acts against the young and innocent, and that they consider the rest of us to be nothing more than cattle. Coming to the realization that all of these things are real and that the world is not in fact run by good people is often referred to as being red-pilled. In other words, a red-pilled person sees the world as it truly is. The reference is taken from The Matrix, also a very relevant movie to our times. The Matrix contains similar themes to today's movie and might be one I need to focus on for a future video. If you haven't seen the first Matrix movie, now you have homework. Black-pilled has become another common phrase. It takes things one step further than the red because the black-pilled person learned the truth of how the world works and concluded that there's nothing that can be done, becoming cynical and experiencing hopelessness. It's understandable, and I empathize with folks on this because the truth really is tough to deal with. It's like that old movie said,
"You can't handle the truth!"
Although I find the Simpsons version to be a little more funny.
"You can't handle the truth. No truth handler, you. I deride your truth handling abilities."
I don't recommend going down the black pill road because, in the end, what's the use in that? It's not productive, it won't help you to make a difference, and you don't know what the future holds for you. We gotta have hope.
Rebellions are built on hope.
If you want to make a difference, you can't just give up. For the currently black-pilled, I would say, don't give up. Remember these important lessons taught by J.R.R. Tolkien, a soldier and survivor of World War I.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the will of evil.
But there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
Anyway, let's bring it back to entertainment. The early 2020s saw the peak of the DEI, lecturing, condescending, self-righteous Hollywood era. But after everything society has been put through, pandemics, racial conflicts, religious persecution, government corruption, recessions, and inflation, well, the public just didn't think Hollywood's politically correct antics were funny anymore. It could no longer be dismissed as just some stupid material put out by stupid writers. No, now it was being seen for what it really was, an assault on our culture, our religions, an insult to our collective intelligence, an attempt to warp our very understanding of reality. And I'm happy to say that the efforts by hypocritical and self-righteous studios and their puppet celebrities just aren't impressing us anymore. Let's rant. I'm going to go into a bit of a tangent here, but it does have a purpose, so bear with me. Last year I did a deep dive into the fall of Disney. Link in the description below. I bring it up because if you want to understand where America is at right now when faced with an antagonistic, brainwashing entertainment industry, there is no better example than Disney. The Disney company has branded itself for nearly the entirety of its existence as family-friendly entertainment. It maintained its popularity for decades and had millions of loyal fans around the globe. Most of us in the US grew up watching their movies. However, at some point they started introducing more and more politically correct and DEI themes into their movies and TV shows. Slowly at first, and then more and more. Disney also bought the Marvel franchise and Lucasfilm. For a time, it seemed they could do no wrong. We were occasionally irritated at the subtle wokeisms woven into their material, but most of us rolled our eyes and continued on. Then certain people were put into positions of authority. Kathleen Kennedy for Lucasfilm, Bob Iger, etc., etc. And the company was led to make decisions not based on what the audience wanted, but based on the politics and ideologies that Disney's leaders wanted the audience to want. It was no longer about the stories and characters, it was all about pushing a liberal progressive narrative. Race swapping, feminist themes, anti-hero sympathizing, deconstructing the foundational lore and characters of their IPs. Yeah, Disney started doing whatever they thought would win them bonus points for woke representation. Thing is, most of Disney's fans are traditional family types, and they were not interested. Again, and especially after 2020 to 2021. Still, the diehard fans held out for years, but patience and goodwill have limits, even if it took a good decade of audience abuse to get there. Like the Alien broadcast in They Live, Disney was trying to manipulate its audience of traditional family types to start accepting modern wokeness and see it as normal. It was trying to change public perception, and instead of just entertaining, become a tool of socio-political influence. But people finally began to see Disney's not-so-subtle messaging for the manipulation that it was. And they didn't like it. You want an example? Marvel and Star Wars have a fan base that is predominantly male. When Disney produced flops or received harsh criticism for tampering with fundamental lore, Disney execs consistently blamed the fans for their failures, insulting and alienating male fans every time something went wrong. Instead of listening to their audience and admitting mistakes, Disney execs called them all the usual bad names, you know the ones, racist, bigot, yada yada yada, and they repeated this behavior over and over. They knew that they were going against their fan bases. They knew they were inserting their political agendas into material not suited to it. But they did it anyway, repeatedly, somehow expecting the viewers to capitulate. Can you imagine the ego of these people? They seem to think that because these franchises were so big that there was no chance of failure. It's like they believed men would just endure insult after insult, but remained so desperate for Star Wars that, no matter what, they'd show up in theaters anyway, even against their own will. Despite decades of loyalty to these brands, the men finally started to ditch Star Wars and Marvel. What were they going to hang around for? Their heroes had been dismantled, nerfed, and humiliated. The stories were now all about female empowerment and presenting the male characters as weaker and less intelligent. As a result, Lucasfilm and Marvel have suffered a great deal financially, with many flops and disappointments bringing down Disney's stock prices to a point not seen since before COVID. That might not sound crazy at first, but consider how many franchises and acquisitions Disney bought, only to make the same thing that they were making a decade ago. In other words, they haven't got a very good return on the investment. I go on this itty-bitty tangent to show you exactly the pattern of behavior that has gotten Hollywood to where it is now. Studios keep bashing their heads against the wall, trying to make us like things that we just don't want. Others are now trying to play it so safe that their stories are bland and lifeless, or garbled and wishy-washy. Why are they struggling so much now? Because a lot of us have woken up, and like Nada and They Live, we're beginning to see, and we don't like who and what we are seeing. For example, the He-Man movie that just came out, a brand loved by, let's face it, men who grew up watching the cartoon back in the day. But despite it being all about a manly protagonist called He-Man, the writers and creators were too embarrassed about their product to even take it seriously, and couldn't bring themselves to include his name until the very end. A movie where every serious moment is interrupted with sarcasm or something stupid, making it a story you can't really enjoy, except shallowly. So they made this product, but why? Because they need the men's money. Remember, in They Live, the money was supposed to be the people's god. Money is the god of Hollywood. If we don't give money to the movie folks, their profession crumbles to dust. But they also still apparently feel the need to play the game of pro-feminism perspectives and not letting a white male like He-Man get too popular or be taken seriously, even in his own movie. Now that so many people can see their motives for what they truly are, movie makers are finding it harder and harder to sell their product. And I say, good. The game is over. The jig is up. We know who these people are and what they're trying to pull. Give us what we want, or we'll just walk away and support someone who does. The age of brainwashing and mindless acceptance is over. People can see the hollow and destructive messages for what they truly are. Give us something real, something authentic, something that teaches good and true ideas, or face financial ruin, Hollywood. Because if you don't, you'll soon be just a memory. After you've sold everything to Netflix, and let's be honest, after everyone becomes addicted to AI short stories about werewolves and vampires. Sorry, self-important stars of the red carpet. Sorry, lefty writers, directors, and producers. The world just won't need you anymore. So shape up and start acting right, or you'll all be out of a job. My thoughts and theories. You may think after all that ranting that I hate all entertainment, but that's not it. If I did, I wouldn't be doing this kind of a channel. I love movies and TV shows. I quote them all the time. TV has great potential for teaching us things in a way that are effective because the visuals and sounds make things stick in our memories. I found that it's especially good for learning a second language, but like just about everything, there's a light side and there's a dark side. Use TV for good to educate and inspire mankind with beautiful truth, or use it to confuse and brainwash a society with falsehoods. You can look at They Live and just see it as sci-fi, but after all the major wars and crises I've observed over my lifetime, I'd say this movie is an accurate representation of the world we live in. I watched They Live on YouTube, which I recommend because they filtered out the bad language and made the last scene more PG. For those who have seen the movie, you know what I mean. And I laughed because in YouTube's comment section, someone said, "Thanks for the documentary," which vibes exactly with how I feel about it. As Americans, and everyone around the world, we've seen psyops play out on television and news, and we've seen false flag operations, we've seen the cover-up of fraud and scandal by elected officials, we've seen national leaders get caught up in the Epstein files scandal. It's become common knowledge that we are governed and influenced by the elite from around the world, most of whom are named in said files. The aliens in They Live are an adequate representation of that global network. Ugly, parasitic, deceiving, controlling. Here's a few things I noticed. The aliens said by the year 2025, the world would be under the complete control of them and their human collaborators. Spooky. The alien teleportation tech was sending people to the Andromeda Galaxy. I wonder what's going on there. Nada is big and muscular. They show off his physique a couple times during the movie, and that of course will attract people's attention, for obvious reasons. However, looking at today's modern society, we can also infer that Nada represents the kind of man that those in power fear the most. Strong men capable of defending themselves, who are willing to fight against evil. This requires a higher level of toughness and masculinity, two things our modern society currently rails against. Most people were either ignorant of the big scheme or willing to sign up with the baddies in order to save themselves. Some did it because they desired a better quality of life, but there were also plenty who did not and fought to end the rule of the parasites. While they were few, they made a difference. It was thanks to them that Nada woke up, and their efforts did ultimately achieve their goal through him. Nada was used to discomfort, not fitting in, and getting his hands dirty. He worked hard to sustain his life and understood the struggle of the poor and the system's attitude and hostility towards them. He had no interest in selling out. In short, he was the hidden enemy's worst nightmare. The rebellion initially began in a church. I believe this is symbolic of how it was the faith and beliefs of the people there that allowed them to discern the mass deception and investigate it. Because their moral convictions enabled them to listen to their conscience, they found strength to fight against the overwhelming evil enslaving the human race. The fist fight between Nada and Frank is so long because it was a representation of how difficult it is to wake people up to the truth of how the world actually works, who runs it, and how bad the situation really is. I'm sure many people now understand that struggle, whether from Nada's point of view or from Frank's. It's not easy to wake people up and see. People often can't handle it and instead fight against hearing the truth, even when the evidence is right in front of them and can be proven. The fact that the interruptive broadcast by the bearded man caused people's heads to hurt, and that wearing the sunglasses for too long also caused headaches, represents the pain of seeing things as they really are. Seeing the ugly truth is difficult, it's stressful, and it interrupts a person's peace and calm. Many of us have been there and experienced it firsthand, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't face it. We can show courage and grow stronger like Nada, or we can run and ignore it like most people in the story. Did you notice that they dropped down into an underground facility? Rumors have spread for decades about an underground network of tunnels and facilities that allow elites, governments, and military to travel and conduct operations away from the eyes of the public. There are dozens of deep underground military bases in the US alone, perhaps many more, and we have no idea how many miles of tunnels. It's a subject of great interest and mystery to all citizens who can see. If you've never looked up tunnel boring machines, I think you'll be shocked at their scale and how much they can accomplish nowadays. Go back to World War II history, and you'll see that the Germans had around 1,000 bunkers and dozens of miles of underground tunnels and railway systems under Berlin alone. If they could do that back in World War II, how much can we accomplish today? Holly and the drifter from the homeless community represent people who will cooperate with whoever is currently in power, just because it's easier. They wanted to have a bigger piece of the pie and not suffer poverty, and both felt like the situation was hopeless anyway. They represent the vast majority of our elected leaders, as well as the owners and higher-ups of the largest corporations. But they also represent the average person who starts to take the black pill. Someone who gives up and goes with the flow because they don't think fighting will do any good. John Carpenter was making us take a good look at ourselves. What the creators intended. As for the writer and creator of They Live, John Carpenter stated that the movie was his reaction to a few things: the culture and greed and consumerism in the 1980s, the political climate of the Ronald Reagan era, the rise of yuppie culture, advertising and media manipulation, the feeling that people were being conditioned to obey and consume without questioning authority. Carpenter described the film as being about yuppies and unrestrained capitalism, not about any ethnic or religious conspiracy. In the end, the aliens worked as a sci-fi metaphor. Carpenter often used horror or science fiction as camouflage for social commentary. In They Live, the aliens represent elites who profit from keeping ordinary people distracted, divided, and endlessly consuming. Gee, doesn't it all land just a little too close to home? Plot holes. The Resistance fighters are as effective at aiming their guns and hitting targets as the stormtroopers of Star Wars. Nada was the only one that hit his intended target, except Holly, but she cheated. Looks like they borrowed the design for the alien high-tech from Ghostbusters. They took some of these fight moves straight from a WWE arena, or maybe even Nacho Libre.